All right, we should be live and ready to go. All right, well, it's time for us to get our third episode in, and hopefully, we have better audio than the past couple episodes. And so far, we're already on to week one after we got finished with a quick, short week zero, and we should be probably what do we have about 5 games, going over about 5 6 games that are going to be on the Thursday slate. Give you a quick preview that way you know what all's going on, and let's kick it off with the first game: Central Florida against the Kent State Golden Flashes. What do you say, Connor?
UCF will win this game, no doubt. I don't have a play on this game. I'm currently looking up lines for that game right now. Let's see if I can
Last I
find.
saw, Central Florida was favored by 37 points at home.
Yeah, if you really feel like you can have a play on this, the lowest line that I can find is like 36 and a half. And I think you can get that at FanDuel. And let's see what other place this is.
Kent State's going to have a down year this year. I think we know that for a fact.
Oh gosh, yeah, they're going to be in for a long year. You can find 36 and a half at FanDuel and at BetMGM. Oh yeah, there's also some 36s out there. But yeah, most of them are 37. Uh, I don't have a play on this game. It's a weeknight game, and I really do not like betting on weeknight games in terms of spreads.
Mm-hmm.
Money lines, though, sometimes. UCF will win this game big. The bounce house is going to be even crazier this year for UCF because all those fans are going to be super pumped about being in the Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
Their first game as a Power 5 team. They're not losing this game, and it's going to get ugly for Kent State. So for those of you who may not be aware, Kent State is in a major rebuild. No team in the country has as much production to replace as the Golden Flashes, and I don't think they're going to live up to that first part of their name this year. I don't think they're going to be very golden.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, Probably looking at a 2-10, 3-9 kind of season. I know they're in the MAC, so they might win a couple games maybe down the stretch, but they're not making a bowl game. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. And UCF, they should have really good crowd. First home game. Hopefully, they get some good weather. Looks like there may be a hurricane coming in, so I'm sure there's going to be rain. But I mean, I would not and do not really play spreads this high,
Mm-mm.
unless there's not really an unless. I mean, unless it's the only game on and you want to have action, some sort of action on it. Okay, sure, lay the points or take the points, but it's not something I would like to play here. I do think UCF will have a really good season, pretty strong season behind John Reese Plumley. He'll have the weapons. He's gonna be what year three? Is it year three with Central Florida?
Well, I know he's been playing college football since at least 2019, but
Well,
he was
Ole
originally at Ole
Miss,
Miss.
yeah.
Um, yeah, year two or year three, I forgot when he transferred.
Yeah, yeah, me either. And in Gus Malzahn's system, and he did all right last year. But yeah, you're right. Central Florida gets their wish. They get to play with the big boys, Big 12, and see what they could do. And they should have a pretty solid season. But yeah, regarding the betting spread or the total, I don't really have any opinion on it other than they should run away with the game. But I'm not gonna. It's not something that I feel like playing.
If there's anything interesting, I guess, to watch in this game, it's how does Kent State look? Because we don't really know what they're going to look like. I don't even know if they can field a two deep, honestly, this year. They just lost so much in the portal, lost a lot to graduation, lost a lot of their coaching staff. The talent is obviously not where it was last year. Not like they were uber talented last year, but they did lose a couple guys that went to the Power Five, and including someone who's still waiting on his eligibility status at North Carolina with Tez Walker. Really good receiver for Kent State last year. But yeah, Kent State's going to be down this year, and this is not the game to tune into. I know everyone's going to be excited. Officially, week one kicks off, and even though we had week zero, it really feels like this Thursday night's going to be the real first day of college football for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And this is not the game to tune into, unless you're interested in seeing, I guess, how bad Kent State looks.
Yeah. I mean, this game starts at 6 o'clock Central. The next game, which we might as well just get into now. North Carolina State at UConn Huskies. That game starts 30 minutes later. So yeah, you could check out the Central Florida game for about 30 minutes and then tune back over to North Carolina State UConn, which I don't know about a good game, but I think it will be a more competitive game than people would imagine. And we have a 14-point spread, or 14 and a half. At least I'm seeing 14 and a half at DraftKings. The Wolfpack are favored with a total of 46 and a half. What do you think about this game, Connor?
So this point total is going between 46 and a half and 47, like every 10 minutes, it feels like. You can find either of those numbers at a lot of sports books. Um, no play for me, obviously. It's a weeknight game. I'll let you know when I have a play for a weeknight game, other than winners, obviously predicting winners, but usually at ATS, I don't like to do as much. What I am looking forward to about this game is you got a UConn team that is what NC State was last year. They returned just about everyone from last year's team that surprised a lot of people, made a bowl game. Jim Moore did great things for UConn last year, especially defensively. But I don't know if UConn's going to get back to a bowl game this year. Honestly, they got teams at the right time a lot last year. They ended last season playing well because they got a Liberty team at the end of the season who didn't really care because we knew the situation with Hugh Freeze there
Mm-hmm.
with the situation with Freeze. Then they played UMass, and then they played Boston College, who was just struggling with injuries to a large degree at that point. They still only beat them by 10. They only beat Liberty by 3. So any game that could have gone either way went UConn's way last year. So they won all the close games. They got teams at the right time. Didn't really play good at all offensively. They did get a kind of a late transfer quarterback. Let me pull him up right now. As of now, the starting quarterback for UConn is Roberson, which was the former Penn State backup. But Joseph Fagnano, I think is how you pronounce his, or Fanano.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he is a transfer from Maine, senior. He did pretty good stuff at Maine, so it'll be interesting to see if he can crack the starting lineup for UConn, which would be ideal for UConn because defense is not the issue right now for UConn. It's
Mm-hmm.
their offense. Um, so what I'm also interested in seeing about this game is how NC State looks. So I discussed from the get go about last year NC State returned a lot. Well, that's not the case this year. They do have a lot of starters to replace and a lot of production to replace as well, but especially starters.
Mm-hmm.
NC State does have some pretty good depth, um, better than people would assume after all the production lost from last year, but I don't think they're quite as talented as what they were a year ago. Um, but I think NC State's winning this game. But the new look NC State offense, they have a new offensive coordinator. That's going to be with his former quarterback at
Mm-hmm.
Virginia. Armstrong's going to be the starting quarterback for NC State. The receiving core for NC State, I've got a lot of questions about them. A lot of young guys. They got that like Rozier guy from Rice, like that 8th-year senior. He's like
Uh-huh.
one of the oldest players in college football right now. Big guy. He can high point the ball. He's got some decent speed, pretty good downfield catch ability. But other than him, it's going to be probably a freshman or sophomore stepping up, and I'm sure someone will break through. But as of right now, I've got my questions about the receiving core for NC State. I've got questions a lot for questions abound for NC State this year with a lot of the guys that they lost from last year. But don't ever, um, don't ever count out a Dave Doran led team. I'm sure he's going to get the most out of this team. I expect NC State to at the very least be back in the postseason, potentially even finish with a winning record. But I know it's almost like I'm giving you a preview of the entire football team for NC State here, but they're a little bit of an intriguing team, and so is UConn. I don't have a play on this game. I wouldn't be shocked if UConn covered. I also would not be shocked if NC State covered. But I guess if anything to watch for in this game is probably a lower scoring game is what
Hmm.
the point total is already kind of showing here with 46.5 to 47. So
Yeah.
that's about the only thing that I would have a play on.
Yeah, and Robert and he's back with Brennan Armstrong. Armstrong took a major step back last year compared to what he did a couple of seasons ago. So maybe he can get that magic back with Anai running the offense. Anai, he's really had a great, well, I say great. He's had pretty good offenses everywhere he's been. Um
Yeah.
and you know, I personally prefer MJ Morris. He's sophomore. I guess he should qualify as a sophomore this season. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he got at least uh enough games to where he wouldn't be considered a freshman any longer. I liked him a lot last year at the end of the year when North Carolina State had Devin Leary. He got knocked out, and Morris eventually had to step in, and he started to get that offense humming. They were able to get some wins, but Robert and they bring, well, they hire him, but they bring in Brendan Armstrong, so they're gonna give him a pretty good chance at the beginning of the year to try to get this offense going on the right direction. But UConn also, like you said, they bring back a lot of talent. That's why right now, at least I'm leaning towards taking the 14 and a half points with them at home. They're not, they're still not the best team, but that's just where I'm leaning based off of the amount of points, not so much the talent level that UConn has. But we'll see. Is this is one of those games where you probably want to sit back and wait, mainly because of that Robert and Brennan Armstrong connection. If it's hot, then yeah, they can get that offense humming. But UConn's bringing back plenty of veterans on both sides of the ball. Rosa on at running back. So we'll see how this line plays out. I'm not too sure. Let me see if have it. I think I have it pulled up here where I could take a quick look. Uh,
Everywhere you look is like 14 or 14 and a half or 15.
Okay. Yeah, the North Carolina State opened up as a 15-point favorite. Now they're sitting at 15 to 14 and a half. So if you like UConn, just go ahead and wait. I think, this number will trickle up or stay around 14 and a half points the next couple of days. But yeah, I think the majority of the game is basically going to be based off of uh Brandon Armstrong coming back. Is he going to be what he was a couple years ago, or is the offense going to be flat? If the offense is going to be flat, then UConn definitely has a chance to stay within the number. I wouldn't be saying they'll win the game outright, but I could see them keeping it close for sure, though.
Yeah, especially with the running clock now, and we'll see how the
Yeah.
market adjusts to that. Um, and I do have a play, by the way. A lot of it because, and according to the market before it adjusts, that we'll discuss probably later tonight on this show. But yeah, this is a really intriguing game for a lot of reasons, and I don't know what to do with it. So I just kind of want to kick back and watch to see how it goes. But this would be a kind of a good guiding point for both teams moving forward
Yeah.
this year because I'm not really sure what to think of either team.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I kind of feel the same way. You'll get at least a better idea of how the Anai offense is going to run with Armstrong, and then if UConn builds on what they kind of did last season, so it would be good to wait and see. And with that, we can get into the next game. Next game is going to be at 7 o'clock Central Time, which this number has actually been bouncing around pretty much the past 5 to 10, 20 minutes, I want to say. And that's the Florida Utah game. A lot of, I wouldn't say, a lot of intrigue with Utah. Is Cam Rising going to play? Is he not going to play? The spread's been sitting at 6.5 and 7 this past weekend. It got shot down to 4 and 4.5. Utah favored by 4 and 4.5 points. So nobody really knows what's going to go. If Cam Rising is going to go, is he not going to go? But it now just switched over to 4 points in a lot of casinos in Las Vegas. So right now, and this happened in the past, like I said, 10 to 20 minutes, maybe less. Utah's now favored by 5 points at the South Point, 4 points at the Circa, Golden Nugget, Westgate, and then there's some casinos, other casinos that still have it at 6.5. DraftKings, Stations, Win, and nope, Caesars is at 4 as well. So, what do you think? I know the quarterback right now for Utah is a giant question mark, but what do you think about this game right now, Connor?
Well, I think I included a Florida under in our preview magazine. The best bet for this was like 2 maybe 3 months ago was the point total. I guess 2 months ago would have been the point total when it opened up and it quickly went down a few points. Taking the under when the point total first opened would have been the ideal way to go
Mm-hmm.
here. Um, Again, weeknight game. I do not like to mess with the ATS. But I do feel like Utah is going to find a way to win. It's probably going to be an ugly game, whether or not Cam Rising plays. To tell you the truth, if Cam Rising plays, I think there's an outside chance Utah wins by 8, 9, 10 points. But if he does not play, you're looking at a close game, comes down to the wire, probably some field goal drive in the last few minutes that ultimately decides it, like a 20-17 kind of score, and both teams are struggling to eclipse 350 yards of total offense. Um, again, the under would have been the play from the get go, but now that point total has significantly gone down. I want to see where it is
Yeah,
now.
it opened up at 46 points and it's now down to 45, 44 and a half. I think I saw 44 no, 45 and then a handful of 44 and a halves. So about a point and a half movement there. Um as you bet football long enough, you'll know every point counts. So
Yeah.
um or in any sport rather, but yeah, that opened at 46 and it ticked down a point and a half. If you think that, whether Cam Rising plays, doesn't play, if you think they're going to be conservative and run the ball, then yeah, that kind of goes into the under. They'll be Florida. We know. Well, we discussed this a couple episodes ago, but we know Florida's going to want to run the ball and run heavy. Like that's going to be their offensive game plan going into the season. At least before we can actually get eyes on this team and see how they look. But just based off of the roster and their scheme, it looks like they're going to be a power running team with a couple of the couple of top SEC running backs like ETN. And which, if you watch the games this past weekend, you know that clock that clock's running like I wouldn't say it's really fast, but it makes a difference, especially when you're watching like on third downs and a team completes a first down and a clock just keeps running. So we did see a lot of unders. I want to say the only over we saw was the USC. I don't know what the
Oh, San
total
Jose
was on
State.
the Vanderbilt game, but I think the USC game may have gone over. I don't know the exact total, but they scored at least 60 points in that game. I think I don't have it written down here, but
It was like 56-28.
yeah. So if that got up to 70, then that game definitely went over. Um, yeah, the clock's making a difference for sure. I agree, Savon, and yeah, and you saw it a lot in the Navy Notre Dame game. That game probably should have gone over the total for multiple reasons, but both teams ran the ball. I mean, we know Navy's going to run the ball, but Notre Dame ran the ball plenty until they decided to release Sam Hartman, and he just torched Navy even more than the running backs were. But yeah, so that's something to think about. Even though the point total ticked down 1.5 points, if we're expecting a banged up Cam Rising and a Florida team that's going to want to grind the clock down, like Connor talked about in the offseason on our website, on the Florida article about us thinking that the game's going to go, or not the game, but their season win total is going to go under, then that kind of trends towards the under the way we think the game's going to play out. And even if Cam Rising's healthy and he's slinging the ball around, Utah's still a team that'll run the ball plenty. So with a
Yeah.
banged up Cam Rising, the total's not a terrible place to look at, especially if it. I mean, it hasn't moved 3 points, 2.5 points, like point and a half. It's just something to look at, something to think about if you're an under player. Not many people are, but um, in this case, it may be the place to look at. I like Utah in this game, whether Cam Rising's playing or not. But like I said, I'm not gonna have a play on these until the day of. But it's important to note that this line is moving between 4 and 6.5 points almost on a daily basis. So keep an eye out.
Yeah. Whether or not Cam Rising plays, just feel like Utah's going to find a way to win this game. It could obviously be a little uglier if Cam Rising does not play, but even if he does, I think it could be kind of ugly.
Yeah.
Florida is going to try to make games ugly this year. So what they did in the portal, they didn't do a ton, I don't think, but what they did is they got size for their offense and defensive lines. So it's like Florida is going to attempt to play in a phone booth as much as they can this year, keep games close down the stretch, play like Iowa State kind of does. Um, Probably that conservative approach. Billy Napier in his first couple of years at ULL, honestly, in all of his years, he was in a ton of one-score games, and they managed it pretty well. So we'll see what the in-game management is like for Florida. But this is in respect to what ULL was to their Sunbelt opponents with Billy Napier. Florida has a much more uphill battle in respect to their roster compared to Florida's schedule
Mm-hmm.
uh, here. So I think there's an outside chance Florida might only be a favorite in 3 or 4 games this year. Um, they'll be a favorite at home against McNeese, at home against Charlotte, at home against Vanderbilt, maybe at home against Arkansas. They'll be like a at that point they may not even be a favorite, but the potentially maybe a point or two, three, maybe a 3 point favorite with the 2.5 points that Vegas likes to give to the home team. But
Yeah.
outside of that, I don't think Florida is going to be a favorite in any game this year. They might be a short underdog at South Carolina. I don't think South Carolina is going to be very good this year. Um, yeah, I don't see Florida getting to 6 wins, whether or not they win this game. Actually,
Yeah.
um, it's just too difficult of a schedule. Too many difficult road games, specifically like some of the games that you would highlight for Florida with like the gettable games, they're on the road. So it's gonna add up for Florida. Um, Utah, I know it's like I'm almost talking about win totals right now.
Yeah.
I don't know what to think. I don't know what to think about Utah this year. I've seen a ton of people. They've got, I think, a win total of like 8.5 in most sports books. I would stay away from that. Utah usually starts off the season slow. They've got a really difficult September schedule this year. And then, of course, this first game, August 31st, is not easy, I should
Mm-hmm.
say. And then you got the Cam Rising situation. Utah has like their most difficult schedule that they've had maybe ever, and since they've been in the Pac-12. So either team here, I would not suggest on betting towards or betting for moving forward in a lot of games, especially early on this year. Um, John, what are your thoughts about these two teams moving forward? Because I don't really care what happens in this game because I
Mm-hmm.
don't think either team is going to live up to expectation.
Yeah, I mean, expectations for Utah, I guess, are what Pac-12 championship, right? Assuming Cam Rising is healthy, their focus is on winning the Pac-12 championship, and obviously getting to the college football playoff. They have Cam Rising last season. They're gonna push for like that's their expectations is over those 8.5 wins and winning the Pac-12. Like that's what it is. Florida, I mean, their expectations are survive pretty much, build up their roster because I mean, when you're in a conference like the SEC, you just have to be realistic about where you are. You want people to you develop. You don't want to lose people to the transfer portal. You want to be competitive, right? So you're gonna have to compete. But like we talked about, their win total, we like the under because it just is just a brutal schedule for a team that A doesn't have a quarterback, and two, they don't have the talent at the skill positions to survive in the SEC. Um, like I wrote about Vanderbilt, for example, after their game against Hawaii. Vanderbilt looked good, but their defense got destroyed by Hawaii. So what do you think an SEC offense is going to do to a Vanderbilt defense? Comparing Vanderbilt to Florida is a little different, but that's kind of the situation Florida's in on both sides of the ball. They don't have an SEC quality offense coming into this season to fight for a conference championship. So if I'm Florida, they kind of, I would use the word failed with the Rashada deal. Whatever the details were, trying to get Rashada into Florida, him leaving, them being left high and dry without a quarterback. That's probably a terrible scenario where you got to bring in Graham Mertz, who couldn't even complete a pass at Wisconsin, right?
Right.
So, what do you think he's going to do in the SEC? It's probably not going to be good. So, I think surviving and not losing a lot of players to the transfer portal, which very well could happen in this today's day and age. So, but yeah, I think they could be competitive though, but we just don't know how Utah's gonna look, or either of these teams for that matter. But it'll be an interesting game to watch, and I think we'll learn a lot about both teams by the end of the night.
Yeah, we certainly will.
At least where
Uh,
where they are to start the season. Like with Utah, we have high expectations for them, but their realistic expectations are who's playing quarterback, the backups injured, what kind of practice have these guys gotten, so we don't really like their theoretical expectations, but then the realistic ones, we don't really know until we see what they're working with Thursday night.
right, and that's another thing. Utah's second string quarterback, he's out for like the year, if not
Yeah.
or at least most of the year.
So now you're
So
like
they're going to be
the practice.
yeah,
I get well, even if Cam Rising has been practicing that much, the backup's injured. At least the third stringer, who I don't know whose name, is getting all the reps. You're still going to go against a Florida defense, so that's not going to be easy. So if that's the case, and that's basically what the spread is telling us, that Cam Rising either isn't going to be ready to go, or he's going to be banged up. Number coming from 7 all the way down to 4. But now that you mention it, the more I'm thinking about it, the the game under is starting to look pretty appealing.
yeah. Um, so they currently have Bryson Barnes listed at quarterback too, but is that the guy that's out for the year?
I'm not sure. I don't have their roster in front of me. Brian, if he's the guy who played last year, I mean, he was decent as a backup last year. But the third stringer, yeah, I don't have any idea who that's going to be stepping in. And Kyle Whittingham, whenever, I mean, he's actually been kind of spoiled, but he used to never have a good quarter. Well, he's actually had pretty good quarterbacks. Actually, to be honest, he's actually had pretty good quarterbacks, but he still does and enjoys a grind out defensive game as well. So, like I said, if Rising's banged up, not fully recovered, runs a not a very I don't want to say effective, but um, the offense, they could be limited. I don't know. I'm starting to think about the under here now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'd be a bad bet, but you know me, I usually avoid weeknight games.
Yeah,
So
yeah. No, I don't blame you. And there's just so much uncertainty in this specific game. It's hard to make a an actual judgment call. A couple days early because we really don't know. It's just all speculation at this point.
yeah, so it looks like Bryson Barnes and then Nate Johnson are still battling for the number two spot behind Cam Rising, but
Okay.
I heard some news that one of the backup quarterbacks for Utah is like badly injured. So, but this article just came out a day ago.
Okay.
So,
So yeah, I mean,
but
just with that in mind, I wouldn't even jump to playing the spread unless you're someone who likes to you already have like a um a Utah -7, you want to get a 4 or whatever the case may be. But yeah, for me, this one, it'd probably be a pass on the point total or on the spread rather for right now.
Yeah, certainly a pass for me. Something else that a lot of people don't discuss is I don't think the Utah receivers are that special. Like Money Parks is back. He is what he is kind of guy. Same thing with Devon Vele. Vele is well, he and Micah Pittman. So Micah Pittman and Devon Vele will probably be the number one, number two targets for whoever the quarterback is for Utah this year. But Micah
Brandon,
Pittman is a really good slot receiver, like a really good possession guy.
uh huh,
He's not like the guy that's going to go off for 900 yards and 11 touchdowns. He's not that kind of guy.
yeah,
He's the guy that's going to have you. It's going to give you 500 to 600 yards receiving, 6 touchdowns. Now his drop rate's really low, so he has really good hands. So an ideal slot receiver for Utah's system, but they don't really have any difference makers at receiver. The offensive line, they do have depth. They like their offensive line this year. The defensive line, they feel a lot better about this year than they did a year ago. But I just don't think Utah's all that special. I've seen a ton of predictions with Utah at like 10-2,
mm-hmm.
if not. I've even seen one with 11-1.
Wow,
But I've seen a couple people predict them to go to the playoff. Others to have them slotted in at like number one or number two overall in the Pac-12. But I don't see it with Utah. I really don't. I think they're going to be a good, consistent team as they always are,
uh
kind
huh,
of like Kansas State, probably an 8-4 upside, 9-3 kind of team.
yeah.
But I'm not looking at upside for double-digit wins here, at least not for the regular
Yeah,
season.
yeah. And according to the chat on YouTube, Brandon Rose was the injured quarterback who was supposed to be the runaway for backup, and he's the
Okay.
quarterback that's injured. So, um, I'm not too sure the two names that you had mentioned a couple minutes ago, but I don't know if he was included in that. I don't think.
No, he was not.
Okay, okay,
I discussed Bryson Barnes and Nate Johnson,
okay.
but there you go. So now you have another downgrade for the Utah quarterback room. So if anything happens to Cam Rising, even if Cam Rising is playing, he's not going to be his usual self.
No,
Like this is a guy that and a Utah team that they were the last couple of years what they were because of what Cam Rising could do with his feet.
yeah,
And
he's
I think we
fearless,
talked
fearless. You could see it. Yeah, every time they played USC, I mean, the guy, he gave it everything, and that's he made the difference.
so he's not going to be his usual self, even if he is playing, at least not for the first half of the year. Now, so what does that mean? That means instead of 8, 9, 10 carries a game, you could be looking at 3 or 4 carries a game. And the Utah offense is just not the same when Cam Rising is not the Cam Rising we have come to know the last
Hmm.
couple of years.
Yeah,
I don't. My point is, I don't see where the Utah number one overall in the Pac-12 this year. I know they're back-to-back Pac-12 champions, but when you look at this roster, you look at their schedule this year. They normally have one of the most manageable schedules every year in the Pac-12. That's not the case this year.
hmm,
And then with the Cam Rising situation, they normally have their guy at quarterback. He may not be a NFL caliber player, although Cam Rising is when he's healthy. But again, he's not going to be healthy. So my point being, I just don't get the hype with Utah in
yeah,
terms of like New Year's Six hype. I don't get it.
yeah, yeah. It's early, and even like you said, he would have to come out 100% like by next month for and them to go undefeated to live up to those expectations. So, I guess we'll find out on Thursday. And another thing to note is if the number is moving down from, let's say, 7, 6.5 down to 4, and if it's moving down because Cam Rising's not out, it's also important to mention that the point total hasn't moved. Normally, with a quarterback injury, the point total will move down a couple points. But in this case, it's 1.5. So there's just something else to look at. If you're looking at playing the spread based off of Cam Rising news or anything like that, just keep an eye on the total as well. Because if you don't want to play the spread, you can always look at the total. And like I said, it hasn't moved. And normally, if a quarterback is out, that thing's gonna slide down quite a bit, and it hasn't yet. So, I'll just take a look at it. We still got like two day and a half until kickoff, so we'll just have to wait and see pretty much. So, but let's get into the other big Power Five game Thursday night. There's only 4 games. I was thinking there was 5 for some reason, and there may be a D2 game or an FCS game, FBS against FCS game. I don't know for sure, but that may be why I
There
was thinking
are,
5. Okay, there are. Okay, that's why I was thinking
yeah, I
there's
mean,
more games.
in total on Thursday night there are 11 games.
Oh, okay, okay. So I was probably thinking of an FCS FBS game. But the other one we were going to discuss is the Nebraska Minnesota game. That one starts at 7 o'clock as well, Central Time. So we have Minnesota favored by 7 at home. Point total of 43.5. What do you got on these two schools?
And from what I'm looking, it seems like every single sports book currently has Minnesota as a 7-point favorite.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's moved at all since it opened. What did it open at? Yeah, it opened at 7, total of 46. The total came all the way down to 42 and a half. But that 7 stayed pretty constant. It has not moved.
So I I think Minnesota's winning this game. I definitely think that. Other than that, I don't know what to tell you. I I don't think Nebraska is going to be all that improved this year from last year. They've got a lot of question marks on their line of scrimmage. They're going to be playing a lot of freshmen on their offense and defensive lines. So that's going to be something to look for. They have a couple of upperclassmen on the offensive line that are returning from last year, but neither of them have been that great yet. The defense line is going to be a huge question. Linebackers have a couple of guys that have some experience, not a ton of depth. Secondary returns most of their guys from last year, but they weren't that great. Um, they're going to be relied upon at least early with their experience. The offense, it's going to be uh, the transfer receiver that they got from Virginia, Billy Kemp. He is really good.
I was about
He's
to
going to stand
say.
out for Nebraska. He is really good. And then the quarterback they got from Georgia Tech, Jeff Sims. I think he's a good athlete. I
Oh,
think this
he's
coaching staff
starting,
can get.
isn't he? Right, Sims for Nebraska. He's
He
gonna be starting.
oh he definitely should be. I mean,
Yeah,
I'll double check to make sure, but he 100% should be because um, I think he might have been the starter over Casey Thompson. To be honest with you,
yeah,
um,
yeah. I would agree. Casey Thompson's like a cat. He's got like 9 lives. He just keeps getting fine. He's kind of like Tom Herman. Just keeps finding a job somewhere.
yeah. And I think Florida Atlantic will do pretty good things with him and this year, and they return a lot of production. But to go back to Nebraska, Um, yeah, Jeff Sims is listed currently as the starter. This team is going to go as far as uh, Jeff Sims to Billy Kemp can take them because I don't think the defense is going to be all that great. And something else to keep in mind if you go back and look at first year under um, under Matt Rule,
Mm-hmm.
when he was at Temple and when he was at Baylor. I believe in both first seasons at each respective school, that team of his finished 1-11. I know the 2017 Baylor team finished
Mm-hmm.
1-11, and I think it would have been the 2014 Temple team that finished, or 2013 that finished 1-11, or maybe 2-10.
Yeah, and at the time, those two teams were probably a couple of the worst in college football, which Baylor's dealing with sanctions and all of that. And then you had Temple, who just, is just Temple football. But he turned them around, right? PJ Walker, that he got them rated top 25 eventually. Uh, but yeah, he's been known to and take over these programs and bring them all the way back up. And that's why he was the man for Nebraska.
When you look at this too deep for Nebraska, they do have some freshmen scattered in the starting lineup in some positions. Um, Running back, fullback has some. Well, running back's actually pretty experienced, but fullback, the offensive line, the starters. I don't see any freshmen currently listed, but they're pretty much all freshman backups. So they're going to be still playing significant snaps a lot with underclassmen. And on the
Hmm.
defensive line, currently no freshmen listed as starters, but it's pretty much all they have for backups that are sophomores that haven't played a ton. Um, I don't really know, I guess, exactly what to think in Nebraska, other than the fact that I know what other first year teams have done with Matt, or other first year Matt Rule teams have done. So I'm inclined to think Nebraska won't make a bowl game because they haven't made a bowl game in a while,
Yeah.
and Matt Rule doesn't normally do great in his first year. And now it's the Big Ten West, so ultimately, can you win your 23 to 20 games?
Hmm.
Um, so Nebraska's come out on the short end, obviously, of those close games a lot recently. They've been much better than their record suggested, but I like Matt Rule, no doubt about it. I think the future is, I'm not going to say very bright, but I think it's brighter than what it's been for Nebraska for the future. But for this year, I know what to expect from Jeff Sims. I think he's going to improve. I think he's a great athlete. He does need to become more polished as a passer, but I think he will this year. I think he can kind of have the year that who was the quarterback for Baylor back in 2019? I'm going to blank on his name.
Bryce
Charlie
Petty.
Brewer. Charlie Brewer in 2019.
Oh, Brewer.
Charlie Brewer. So he was pretty good for college. He, they got the most out of him.
Yeah.
That's what. Well, I think Jeff Sims is more athletic than Charlie Brewer as a runner, so he could have more highlight reel kind of plays. But as a passer, I think they'll get the most out of him. I'm not saying he's got a high ceiling
Hmm.
as a passer, but I think they'll get the most out of him. He's a great athlete, which will help. And then Billy Kemp, he's going to be an NFL selection potentially next April. He probably will be. He is probably going, if he, without injury. I think Billy Kemp could go over 800 yards receiving this year, get close to 1,000 yards if he stays healthy. Um,
And what about on the other side? What about Minnesota and the Greek Rifle leading the team?
so I think Minnesota. Yeah, we've been talking a while for Nebraska on Nebraska there. Minnesota. Yeah, the Greek Rifle. That's like the best nickname in college football. I think, did I write that in the preview?
Yeah, it's in there. Yeah,
Yeah. So Ethan Kaliak Manis.
that was good
He has the highest ceiling that a Minnesota quarterback has had
since Tony
in,
Dungy.
yeah, it's been a long time. Probably. It's been a long time. Um the receiver room for Minnesota, I think it's sneaky good. They got I gotta pull up his name. They got I think it was Tory Crooms from Western Michigan, and then a pretty good guy they got from Charlotte, who I think was All Conference USA last year. But they did a good job in the portal with the receiving core, and then they got Chris Ottman Bell coming back for his 7th year, so another one of those 7th year
Yeah.
seniors. So and then they got Daniel Jackson as Corey Crooms, his name, Elijah Spencer from Charlotte. This
Okay.
is a good receiving core. And yeah, and they got Chris Hoffman Bell back, Daniel Jackson. This is a very undervalued receiving core. The offensive line, they're old. They've had an old offensive line for a long time now. They just plug and play guys. Like
Hmm.
every year, they have 3 or 4 starters they have to replace, and they just plug and play. So I expect really good things from the offensive line again. They do have a high bar to clear from the last few years. There are a lot of new guys there, so we'll see what they do. I'm not saying they're going to just be just like
Yeah.
the last couple of years. But I mean, I'm setting the bar high for this relatively new offensive line. Um, so I don't think they're going to be like an outright weakness, but we'll see.
Hmm.
The tackles are experienced. The bigger question is in the interior of the offensive line. The biggest question mark that I have for this team is at running back. Now they got Sean Tyler from, I believe, from Western Michigan as well. Yeah, he's pretty fast, but he's not like that power running back
Yeah,
like
because
with
I
Minnesota.
think he's a little on the short side, isn't he? If I'm
I believe
remembering the Western Michigan running back from last year,
5'10".
he's
He's 5'9".
5'9", 5'10".
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
he's not that short, but still. Um,
Oh, oh yeah. Mohibert Abraham.
no, not
I
him. No, I was thinking of the running back from Western Michigan.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, Ibrahim wasn't the biggest, like he wasn't the tallest guy, but he had power,
Oh
and
yeah,
it's hard to bring him down.
his legs were massive.
Yeah. Um, Sean Tyler was more of your speed back, very fast though. Now that's something that Ibrahim didn't really have much of. He didn't have a ton of
Hmm.
speed, so Tyler's got him beat on that end. But we'll see what that power run game is like for Minnesota, and that's something that PJ Fleck teams always have.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they're going to have that this year. I mentioned the questions with the interior of the offensive line, although I'm going to grade them a little bit more harshly because they always seem to live up to expectation
Uh huh.
up front. The bigger question mark for me is at running back. That's the offense. So I think the passing game can actually be better than people think, despite losing um, Tanner Morgan, who felt like was there for 15 years.
It felt like
Um,
it. Yeah.
yeah, so I actually think it could be better despite losing Tanner Morgan. The receiving core is as good as it's been since
Hmm.
2019. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be as good as that year, but it's definitely the best that it's been since then. I know Minnesota fans every single year since that season have been discussing. I think this could be the year the receiving core steps up. Maybe it's this year. Well, okay, I'll believe the hype this year because I think this is a good roster, or at least a good position group roster wise.
Hmm.
Defensively, uh, I've got my questions, but I do every year. On paper, they never look that good. And then they always churn up a top 15, top 20 defense.
Hmm.
They have got a really good coordinator. Um, he always gets the most out of this group. So I would expect the same this year, but the pass rush is going to be an issue again. The
Hmm.
corners are a huge question this year. Um, Justin Wally returns. He stood out as a freshman a couple years ago. So I could see him being a sneaky good NFL draft pick next April. This will be his third year with the Gophers this coming fall. But outside of him, it's going to be all transfers here. They did get some experience to the portal, but
Hmm.
they're stepping up in competition big time here. So the safeties have a little bit of experience with Tyler Nubin, but outside of him, very young. So I have questions about this pass defense. The linebackers, they really like Cody Lidenberg. He stepped up big in the bowl game
Hmm.
against Syracuse. Outside of him, I got questions. So a lot of questions on paper once again for this defense, but I mean, they've certainly overachieved the last couple of years. So
Yeah.
we'll see if they regress on that side of the ball.
And at least they don't have to start the season against Ohio State. So
Right.
that'll help, and hopefully for their case, they can get a win to kick off the season. But yeah, it's been seven. Spread's been seven. Total's the main number that's moved around, and that's gone down from 46 to about 42 and a half. You may find a 43 out there, but that's what it's looking like right now. Myself, not playing the game, I don't really have a real good read on it. Minnesota sounds like that would be the place to go. The line hasn't moved at all. I'm sure it may in the next 2 days, but it's been the whole summer and that thing hasn't moved. So that's usually a telltale sign, especially when it's a seven, not a four or anything like that. It's sitting at seven. So there's not a large group of people trying to buy up, not buy up, but play that seven with Nebraska getting points. So we'll see. Like I said, I probably won't have anything official until Thursday to see how the very end of these lines move around. But as of right now, I don't have anything. Totals moved, like I said, 4 points. So I'll wait and see. No need to rush anything into anything right now. So I'll just wait and see for that. But yeah, pretty much today we just wanted to go over the Thursday games. Do you have anything you wanted to add right now or anything like that, Connor?
I guess one other game only
Okay.
because I took the under on this team and I'm extremely confident with it.
All right, let's
That's
hear it.
UAB. That's UAB. Um, so this will be the one game that I think UAB for sure wins this year. And if they lose this game to North Carolina A&T, it's uh-oh time for UAB. This is the one game though. I feel pretty confident they're going to win. But then I looked at matchup predictor, and I don't like to utilize matchup predictor too often. I really
Mm-hmm.
don't. But I was surprised to see that matchup predictor is giving North Carolina A&T at UAB on a weeknight to with a 14% chance of winning, not a 40, but a 14% chance of winning, which it was a higher mark than I thought it was going to be. I was anticipating something like 6, 7, or 8%, but that's about twice as much as what I thought it was going to be. And that's North Carolina A&T is normally a good football team, so this is nothing against A&T, but North Carolina A&T is in a little bit of a rebuild this year. So is UAB. Don't get me wrong, but UAB is the FBS team. They're going to be much bigger on the line of scrimmage than North Carolina A&T. But again, that offensive line for UAB is going to be downgrade. It's going to be a significant downgrade this year. They lose everybody from last year. They return the lowest amount of snaps, percentage wise, returning snaps on their offensive line. Only like 15% of their offensive line snaps from last year returned for UAB. So I do have my question marks up front for them. They just lost one of their better defensive linemen. The few good players that were held over from the previous
Uh-huh.
coaching staff just transferred to South Carolina like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Really? I guess
Yeah,
that was
he was the
before I guess the portal closed. What is
the
the timeline on that or what?
so I'm not sure. So he was a graduate transfer. Graduate transfers can leave or put their name into the portal at any point. It's
Oh.
for yeah. So that was kind of a last second move for UAB. So they lose a little bit of quality, and they really couldn't afford that. So if I pull up UAB's starting lineup right now, I do know they have a few good players, but outside of that, I mean, this UAB starting lineup is pretty big question mark this year. So I think the receiving core can hold their own this year. Tajon Palmer could be pretty good. I think I talked about TJ Jones in the preview magazine a little bit. They have some experience here. Samario Rudolph, Fred Ferrier the second. They have some experience here, and they have some senior experience, but they're not like that special at receiver. The offensive line, yeah, I've definitely got my questions, obviously, for them. Not a lot of depth. Few transfers, few freshmen in there. Defensively, though, as I just brought up, so they lost. Well, he's obviously not listed on the roster anymore, but they lost one of their guys to South Carolina. South Carolina was in desperate need of a defensive lineman in the portal. I don't know if South Carolina really got a huge upgrade there, but they got at least another body for their depth. But UAB, they have some seniors that are going to be plug and play guys um, from the holdover from the previous coaching staff that have some experience. Kevin Penn, Fish McWilliams is pretty good nose tackle. Michael Fairbanks at defensive end. They have some experience there, but the linebackers are all new this year. The secondary, they're going to be pretty young, relying on some transfers for the two deep. Keandre Swoops is a pretty good safety, but yeah, outside of him, Mac McWilliams is a good corner, but outside of him, that cornerback room scares me. Um, there's just not a lot of depth this year. Jacob Zeno is going to be the starting quarterback. He's not that great. Jermaine Brown Jr. is a guy to watch for at running back if he has any holes this year. And I don't know if the offensive line is going to be providing many holes for him. And I talked about this in the preview. Jermaine Brown, I think he's 5'8". He's not like the workhorse that McBride was
Yeah,
for
definitely not.
no. So yeah, this UAB team is going to struggle this year. I don't think they're making a bowl game. I don't even think they're going to get to 5 wins. I don't even know they're going to get to 4 wins, quite honestly. Um, but this is one of those games that they need to win, obviously, because outside of this, South Florida at home is very winnable. But outside of that, there is no other game where I'm confident with UAB winning straight up. So
And even if
they
they
better be.
lose, it bodes well for our win total under for the Blazers. So wouldn't be
It
too
sure
upset.
does, but
Wouldn't be too upset about it. But
But it just surprised me that Matchup Predictor had North Carolina A&T at a 14% chance of winning. If this had been like any other past year's North Carolina A&T team, I would say, yeah, watch out for the upset. But
yeah,
I would be pretty surprised if A&T won this game.
yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Actually a lot of SFCS schools playing on Thursday. There's a lot of games, and we'll have to touch on those because I think at least Missouri. I know Missouri plays Thursday, and you're high on them. So
Cannot wait to watch that defense. I
yeah,
cannot wait to watch the defense. So one note for Missouri's defense. Chad Bailey, one of their projected starting linebackers, is going to be out for the first few games. So it will be interesting to see if Chad Bailey returns for week 3 for Missouri against Kansas State. But they do have, like I talked about in the preview, they got a ton of depth. So I'm not really worried about it. It's just noteworthy. Tyron Hopper, though, is a great linebacker from Missouri. He's got the most pro potential between Chad Bailey and himself. So in that linebacker room, he's got the most upside. But yeah, they have a lot of depth, and they feel like they got guys who can step up, and I do too. And yeah, that Missouri defense is great from top to bottom and the two deep at every single position. So yeah, I cannot wait to watch the Missouri Tigers this year, and they should beat South Dakota decisively. Let's see, did they have a spread for that game? I don't see any spread listed for that game. Do you have the spread?
what was that, Connor? I was grabbing my charger. I had to go grab that really quick. Which game?
Oh, you're good. The Missouri South Dakota game. I don't see any spreads listed for that game right now.
They usually don't have those up until like the day of, so you won't see one until like the day of, basically the afternoon of, really.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Let's see
So
here because I saw they were playing. If let's see if there was another
South Dakota.
South Dakota. Let me see here. There's an Arizona State also plays on Thursday.
They do.
Yeah.
Now that news about them with the 1 year bowl ban. Two things. One, I was a little disappointed.
Oh yeah.
Um,
That. Yep.
I thought Arizona State actually had an outside chance of playing in a bowl game this year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but second thing though, it's funny because most likely, if you were to simulate the season 20, 30 times, Arizona State is not making a bowl game in the majority of those simulations. So they're probably not making a bowl game. Probably not, anyways. So I think it's kind of funny that they had the 1 year bowl ban.
Mm-hmm.
They put themselves with a 1 year bowl. They did that to themselves. Um, but I also kind of hate it for those players because a lot of those current players for Arizona State and a lot of that staff, they had
Mm-hmm.
absolutely nothing to do with what occurred a couple years ago. So I do
Yeah.
feel bad for that coaching staff and players. I don't think it's right, but
That's usually how it goes, unfortunately, thanks to the NCAA. But
yeah,
yeah, I mean, there's not much you can do about it. I'm sure the NCAA, they'll get rid of that. They'll, I don't know how much longer they'll be able to survive in today's day and age. But we'll wait and see. And the other two D1 schools that play are or is Tulsa and Wake Forest. So not a lot, but we have almost 8 games, 4, 5, 6, 7. But yeah, there's plenty of football, and we're finally back in motion. Week 1, week 0 was a nice little taste, get us back in the flow of things, and then we get spoiled this week with Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, Sunday, Monday games. So yeah, it's as soon as Thursday hits, we will be in pretty much a marathon, and then football season is basically back for us now.
Yeah, it's pretty much back in full swing now. And of course, for me, it kind of feels like it's year round as I'm analyzing these rosters and everything. It's nonstop for me. I
Yeah,
love it.
sometimes it
Uh,
is. I know what you mean. We've been nonstop, especially all summer. It feels like,
yeah. Um, Real
but that's
quick,
good.
uh, with Tulsa,
Yeah.
I've seen some people hype Tulsa up. I don't see. I know why they are. It's that quarterback of theirs. I'm gonna pull him up real quick. I'm going
Uh,
blank.
Duncanville, or am I thinking of somebody else?
I don't think that's him. I talked a little bit about it in the yeah, Braylon Braxton.
Okay, let me.
So really good athlete. Really good athlete. Um, Outside of him, I don't see it with this
Yeah, no,
roster at
I don't see it either. Like you kind of mentioned in the preview, they lost what, two of their best linemen.
yep.
So
To
obviously that
both to
doesn't
Auburn.
help. Yeah, they went to Auburn. That's not going to help. They lost Davis Brin. Um,
Yep.
that's
And I
their
talked about him
quarterback.
too.
Yeah, that's not going to help either. I'm trying to pull up, get Tulsa here in front of me. Yeah. Oh, he's from Frisco. Okay, well, I was kind of close, but yeah, Braylon Braxton from Frisco, Texas Independence High School, a dynamic player who can make plays with his arms and legs. So
Yes.
I could see why people are looking forward to seeing him play. Kevin Wilson's first year at Tulsa, Steve Spurrier Jr. So I would imagine they're going to want to air the ball out. And they start off against the Golden Lions of Arkansas Pine Bluff, and then they have to go to Washington, home against Oklahoma, then to Northern Illinois, home against Temple. Conference starts. So, and you're saying people are high on this Tulsa team going into the season?
Not a lot. There were a couple of people, um, uh, particularly some college football Instagram page
Uh huh.
owners that were hyping Tulsa up earlier this summer, and so I'm like, I was thinking to myself, why? Because I knew they had lost a lot in the portal, some pretty good players. Um, and Tulsa's had some good sneaky talent, like some sneaky good talent over these last couple of years, but they've lost most of those players now. And then I remember thinking, oh, it's probably because of that quarterback. It's probably because of that Braylon guy,
Mm-hmm.
and he is pretty good. But my goodness, I mean, the rest of that roster, the offensive line is probably going to be an issue. Receiving core, this is what I have to say. Whenever you have a team or a position group that's starting from scratch with a bunch of um, new pieces, I'm not going to say that they're all bad, but they have certainly have a lot of questions. Someone's going to step up and do okay. They're going to accumulate stats. Someone's going to step up. They're going to be fine. But like, there's just so many questions on this roster for Tulsa defensively. Like, have they? Do they even have a coordinator yet on defense? Because they didn't have a coordinator for the longest time.
Yeah, I had it right in front of me. Polizzi. Chris
So
Polizzi.
I know that he was probably the last coordinator hired in the FBS because forever Tulsa did not have a defensive coordinator. So I've got my questions about this team, and if I pull them up real quick with their
Yeah, I mean
schedule,
that's like a whole basically it's a whole overhaul on offense, and they haven't had that much time with their coordinator. But I don't know the whole backstory on him, so I can't confirm that. But um yeah, I mean when we talked, a couple weeks ago, and I wasn't very high on Tulsa, but yeah, I was kind of surprised to hear you say that there's some people that are high on Tulsa, or at least if they're high on the quarterback, that's different. But um, yeah, I don't really see it with the team itself, not so much the quarterback.
and that's another thing. I've noticed this, especially with the younger generations. If there is uh, a really good athlete for particularly quarterback,
Uh huh.
and I mean he has to stand out. He can't just be a pretty good athlete. No, he's a really good athlete. Doesn't matter what the rest of the team is, especially with the younger generations. If they see that one really good quarterback, they are going to hype that team up, not just that quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to uh, assume the best case scenario, for the most part for that football for the entire team.
Like Khalil Tate winning the Heisman in Arizona, like winning the Pac-12 type of
Kind of
hype.
like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, kind of like that. And then the following, and then like a year or two later, like they
win
don't
one
even make a
game.
bowl game.
Yeah, I think they only won like 2 or 3 games that season.
So that's probably going to be Tulsa this year. They're going to be like that team with the Khalil Tate quarterback
Yeah.
and Braylon Braxton, and then I'm sure someone else is going to step up, like I mentioned earlier. But it's just not going to be a good team. They're not going to get any stops defensively, and they'll be Arkansas Pine Bluff. At least they should. They have some winnable home games in there against Temple, Rice, Charlotte, and UNT. They're not going to go 4-0 in those games, um, but they can win a couple of those and go 3-9 or 4-8.
Yeah. Kevin Wilson's a decent coach. He's not Nick Saban. He's not, an up and coming coach, but he's a veteran head coach. And, I don't think I wouldn't call him bad. He was pretty competitive and pretty solid head coach at Indiana. But we'll see how he does. A little different change of scenery. But yeah,
Uh,
I don't see how they could. I'm not even too sure what their win total is, but the AAC
four
is
and a
not a slouch conference either. So they're gonna have some tough games.
Yeah, and like their other games. So I mentioned like those five win. Well, they're winnable. They're not going to
Mm-hmm.
win all five, but so I mentioned Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Temple, Rice, Charlotte, and UNT. Those are all five games at home.
Uh huh.
Um, they won't go 5-0 in those games again, but those are winnable. But the rest of the schedule at Washington, Oklahoma, at Northern Illinois. They're going to get back a couple of their players that were injured last year.
Mm-hmm.
At Florida Atlantic, at SMU, at Tulane, and then at East Carolina.
Yeah, it's a pretty tough
So
schedule.
yeah, so I don't see it with Tulsa this year. I don't think they're going to get to a bowl game. So
No, definitely not. And that's not even a knock at Tulsa. I mean, there is it's a pretty much
no,
it's a complete rebuild, so it's pretty much expected. But yeah, I'll be rooting for Braylon Braxton. But will they be winning 6 or more games? I don't really think so. But if they do, I'd be happy for them.
and if they do, that means they won those 5 games that I
Yeah,
told you that. Yeah, and then they win somehow like another game in there, maybe like at a rebuilding East Carolina or something like that, and they pick
yeah,
up some momentum at the end of the season, maybe with a few wins.
yeah. If they could
But
steal one of those road games, like a
yeah,
conference road games, then yeah, I would consider that successful season, they can get to 4 or 5 wins, at least 5 wins. That'd be a pretty good season for them, considering where their roster's at right now.
yeah, I just don't think it's all there, but um, we'll certainly see. But it will be noteworthy this year that in the American Athletic, I don't think it's going to be as good this year.
Yeah,
Um, well,
it's
let me take that back.
very
It's not that I don't think it; I know it. It's not going to be as good.
yeah. There'll definitely be top heavy for sure. But I mean, they lose like pretty good schools, but they also gain, UTSA and who's ready to compete at the very top right now. But not so much, next year. We'll see what happens. But um,
Yeah. This kind of feels like one last ride for UTSA this year.
yeah, exactly. Everyone's got their medical red shirt. Got Frank Harris and everyone back besides Zakari Franklin. But yeah, I mean, we talk about UTSA almost every episode, but they yeah, they should be the class of the AAC, even though it's going to be their first year at the party. So we'll see how it goes. It'll definitely be interesting and entertaining to see how the top of the AAC plays out.
Yeah, so I think UTSA is the best team in the American this year. They do not have the best path, though, for the conference championship game. That's SMU or Memphis.
Yeah,
SMU and Memphis.
SMU and Memphis, they have the easiest route to get to the conference championship game.
Yeah, so I'll we'll go ahead and say this right now, live on YouTube. It is going to be two of these four teams playing in the American Athletic Conference Championship. The one that everyone's talking about, Tulane, UTSA, SMU, and Memphis. And I think UTSA is the best team, but of those four teams, they probably have the most difficult path. Um, but and then we included a preseason win total bet of UTSA over 7.5.
Yep.
Um, it is definitely having to do with that schedule, which is why that number is where it is. But UTSA is not going to go 7-5 with this roster. They may not go 10-11-1, but they're not going to go 7-5.
Yeah.
Um, I
Like
think they have a better chance of
it would
going.
go like it would have to be. I mean, they were so plagued with injuries last season. So I mean, I mean, even if they have a ton of injuries, there's no way it could be as bad as last year.
I mean, what would have to happen is Frank Harris would have to go down with a season ending injury in week one against Houston, and then season kind of falls apart after that. But that's what would have to happen. That's the only way that number would hit the under, I think, or
Yeah.
that UTSA would hit the under with that number. Um, but I think there's a greater chance if you're looking at ceiling and floor scenarios here. I think there's a greater chance that UTSA goes 11-1 and 7-5. So
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I mean, they have the talent. They definitely have NFL talent on the roster. That's for sure. So
yeah,
yeah, it'll be fun to watch them play this year, especially on Saturday against Houston. If they can beat Houston, which I think they will,
yeah.
then yeah, that definitely starts things off on the right track for sure.
Did you want to talk about our win total bets for this Saturday? Do you want to
Uh,
leave that for another episode?
the win totals,
Oh, I'm
like
sorry. I'm sorry. Not win. I'm sorry. I meant our plays for this Saturday.
I don't have any right now, but I know you have a handful. So if you want to talk about them, yeah, go ahead. That's fine with me. Because I know you had mentioned one of them was running. I want to say running away, but it moved a tick or something. So yeah, if you want to, go ahead. That's perfectly fine. I won't have. I usually have all mine the day of. I usually don't like to play days out, even even if there's a number I like for example this past weekend. um I liked Ohio a few weeks ago getting 4 points, ran all the way down to 2 points, quarterback gets hurt, kind of a freak thing, but the points didn't really matter. San Diego State played a good game. But at least for right now, I don't have anything. I'll usually have my stuff a day of, which I'll either put. I'll basically put them on Twitter, Instagram, and on the links to the website. So, but yeah, y'all can check that out there. But yeah, go ahead, Connor. Go ahead with your
Well,
first of your plays, or unless you had something else.
well, I was thinking about maybe if I just wait to do my plays once you want to do your plays. But are you thinking about doing it your plays on Saturday?
Yeah, yeah, I'll have mine the day of, like Thursday, Friday, at least for like this week. But yeah,
I
Saturday,
see.
that's when I'm gonna have mine. If you want to wait, that's perfectly fine. I just know that you were talking. You want to at least talk about the one total. I believe it's the Penn State West Virginia game. You can at least talk about that way because that one was moving a little bit.
Yeah, and it keeps moving down. I'll go ahead and just briefly talk about the four because I will not have time to jump on here on Saturday with you. So my four, so we'll start with the under, um, the point total under that I took on West Virginia and Penn State. So when I first took this, when I first saw it a few days ago, it was at 51 and a half. And then within several hours, it dropped down to 50 and a half. And then earlier today, it dropped down to 50, and now it's back up to 50 and a half. So here's why I'm inclined to take this point total under. Two reasons. One, first and foremost, as I mentioned, I think way earlier this summer with you, I think the market, and I said I thought the market was going to be a little bit slow with adjusting to the clock rule change. And I think we saw that with a handful of games in week 0.
Oh yeah.
And I think you're going to see that in a lot of games in week 1, and most notably this game. So that brings me to my second point. Both West Virginia and Penn State, especially to start the season, are going to run the football. West Virginia's got a lot of questions on with their receiving core. The quarterback is pretty green, but he's a decent athlete. But they've got all 5 starters back on the offensive line. They're pretty good up front. The running back room, they don't really have like any studs there, but they're deep and they've got a lot of veterans there.
That West Virginia sophomore. I don't have his name in front of me. Trying to pull it up on the magazine, but he was the freshman last year, and he was pretty good. He was a really good running back. So I at least would say, I mean, he's not like a Heisman running back, but I would say he's pretty good running back though.
Oh, CJ Donaldson.
Donaldson, yeah.
So you think he has some NFL upside?
I think he can play in the NFL. He was great last year. I don't know why he didn't start. I don't know why. And when he did play, it wasn't very much. But again, it's Neil Brown. So let me see here. I'm trying to yeah, CJ Donaldson Jr. He played I thought he played great as a sophomore. No, no, no. He was a freshman last year. My bad. I was just looking at the magazine just to double check. But yeah, he was a freshman last year. He'll be a sophomore this season, and I thought he was pretty good last year. I wouldn't. Like I said, he's playing for West Virginia this year. I don't know how good their team's going to be, but I know he's a good running back, and yeah, I could see him having NFL potential though.
That could be true. The senior that had at first elected to come back for West Virginia at running back, he since transferred out. So that probably tells you something about CJ Donaldson. So yeah, maybe Donaldson does have a higher ceiling than I am anticipating here. Um, but West Virginia, nonetheless, is going to rely on the running game. Penn State, same thing. They obviously have a great 1-2 punch at running back. The offensive line brings back 4 guys, including one of the better tackles in the entire country. And then you look at the Penn State passing game, just like West Virginia, you got a lot of questions. The receiving core is pretty young, depth wise, and then the quarterback. Obviously, there's a lot of upside with. Is it Alar? Is that how you pronounce it?
Uh,
Or
I'm not sure how he pronounces it. It's either Aller or Aller or Aller. I honestly don't know. I don't think I've
Aller?
even heard it pronounced. So it's either Aller or Aller. I'm not too sure how he pronounces it.
Um, but you got Drew back there at quarterback for Penn State. Drew doesn't have a his first name's Drew, right? I'm
I'm
not
pretty sure, yeah.
okay.
I'll look it up, but I'm pretty sure that's his first name.
Yeah, I'm looking it up too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for Penn State. Yep.
Um, he doesn't have obviously a ton of experience. He's got a lot of upside, but I don't think you're going to see that upside in that ceiling scenario right off the bat. West Virginia defensively literally cannot get worse than they were last year. They got a ton of transfers there. I have no idea what to expect from this West Virginia defense, but I do know what to expect from both of these teams' offenses, and I think you're going to see them run the football a lot. And piggybacking off of that statement, the one it wasn't even like a weakness, but it was a non-strength, I should say, for Penn State's defense last year was stopping the run up the middle. We saw Michigan run for over 300 yards, I think it was, against Penn State. Now,
Oh,
I am not suggesting West Virginia is going to do that to Penn State, but what I am suggesting is that Penn State, I think West Virginia could at least run down some clock in this game, whether or not they're picking up first downs. I think they're going to turn some clock off, and as I think Penn State's going to do the same. I don't think West Virginia is scoring many points in this game at all. Like I don't see them topping 17. Um, and I don't see Penn State scoring a lot from the get go. And I think Penn State over the course of the game is going to rely on their defense, the running game, the clock, and they're get that crowd into the game. They're not going to make Alar or they're not going to make Aller pass the ball 40, 50 times in this game. They're not going to need him to. They're going to ease him as a sophomore, as a starter in this game. They're not going to press the issue with him. And then for West Virginia, their passing game has a lot of questions, like I mentioned earlier. I love the under for this at 51.5 is when I took it. It's now again at 50.5. I could see a final score of like 31-13. Um, Maybe like 34-10. I could see that as well. So I think the under is going to hit in this game. I don't see it going above 51.
okay. Yeah, and that is one of Donaldson's strengths is running between the tackles, running up the middle.
Yeah.
So at least that may be something that'll help West Virginia. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be West Virginia. And like you said, Penn State has a couple great running backs as well, and yeah, and they could catch the ball. So we didn't see too much of Drew Aller last year. In some spots where the quarterback got injured, he had to come in. Didn't do a whole lot off the top of my head, but yeah, I think that's an interesting play. I think most people may assume that it could be a blowout scenario, so like maybe 40 something to 10. Um, depending on how Penn State depending on how Penn State wants to run their offense, do they want to try to get the lead, get the win, get out of town, or if they have some advantages, do they want to take advantage of the West Virginia defense who could have a pretty down season? Um, but I don't know how West Virginia is going to look. I have very little faith in them, and Penn State looks like they should have a really good offense, depending on Drew Aller's ability. But this kid was like a 5-star prospect coming out of high school, so he's got some talent. We just haven't seen it yet on the collegiate level, really.
Right. And even if he is going to meet that ceiling scenario for himself, it's not going to be this very first game. But where I'm also going with this is that I don't think James Franklin is going to put a lot on his quarterback's shoulders in this game. It's not necessary. West Virginia's got a new look defensive front this year. They did for all the non-strengths for West Virginia last year, one position group that they were decent was the defensive line, and they lose some guys there. So I do think with what Penn State returns on their offensive line and with the running backs, and again you got a young quarterback, a mostly young receiving core. This kind of screams the game where it's like Penn State says, run the ball, play defense, get our crowd into the game, ease Drew into it, and just win ourselves a football game. We don't care about the spread or any style points right now.
Mm-hmm.
We just want to win and do what it takes. And they have the strengths to match up against West Virginia to do just the kind of thing where the under could very well hit in this game. Because
Yeah,
again, West Virginia is going to have that same thing. I can already tell you, West Virginia, they're not going to have the attitude, let's come out swinging. They're going to try to stay in the game. And
survive.
they're going to
Yeah,
do that. Yeah, they're going to do that by relying on the one known entity on their team, which is, well, I guess two, the running back room and then the offensive line. So this screams slow start, 7-3 after the first quarter, 14-3 at halftime in favor of Penn State. And by the end of the game, it's like 31-13. That's
And
that's the kind of score I
what
see.
kind of, since it's kind of ticking down, what number would you say you would kind of ease away from playing the total? Because this is a Saturday game, right? So there's
Yes.
still a lot of time between now and then. What what kind of, do you have like kind of a number that you're thinking that you kind of want to like tread lightly once you see, like a 48 or whatever the case is, to kind of like, well, we don't think this is still going to be a dead under, but what are you thinking, or have you thought about it?
I have thought a little bit about it. I don't think it's going to drop more than 48. So if it goes under 48 and a half, I would stay away from it because I think there's a chance where if the score is like 31-10, there could be some garbage time points.
Yeah.
And so if it goes down to 48, I'd stay away from it. But if it's at 48 and a half, I would consider it.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, if it goes below 48 and a half, I would stay away from it because I think then the market's trying to get a push there, and so I'd stay away from that.
Yeah.
Because there could be some like situation late in the game with West Virginia trying to score some late points or whatever, and there's a turnover and Penn State scores off of it,
Yeah.
and then there's the push. So I would stay away from it if it drops below 49 to 48 and a half. But again, I got it at 51 and a half. It's currently at 50 and a half, so it's already dropped a full point
Yeah.
since I took this under because I'm looking at 51 saying, okay, or 51 and a half, I should say. Okay, I can there can be a 41-10 final score and I could still hit the under. So I felt pretty confident in that because honestly, I don't think Penn State's going to get to 40 points, and if they do, it's going to be like 40 or 41. I don't think
Hmm.
they're going to get six full touchdowns in this game.
And West
Um,
Virginia won't get more than 14, 17 points.
right. So my point is, I don't think there's a scenario where Penn State scores a lot of points and West Virginia scores over 17.
Yeah.
So definitely not that. Something else. Well, I guess one last thing. I have gone on a little bit of a tangent on this game, but
Oh.
this is interesting to me because this is the first time we really had this running clock. Um, so in the past with these kind of games, with stoppage of the clock and how it used to be, we would normally see, in this case, a Penn State win like 45-14. And how many times would there be two or three touchdowns scored in the last several minutes, right? Now, I don't know if we're going to have as many of those late game time. I'm not saying we're not going to have garbage time points because we're still going to have that.
Hmm.
But my point is, I don't think you're going to have multiple scores in the last closing minutes, last few closing minutes of a game because you're not going to get there in terms of that quantity of possessions for each team because of the running clock. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how the market adjusts to this.
Hmm.
I would not be surprised if these style of games by the end of the season you're seeing point totals around 46, 47, 48 instead of 51, 52, 53.
Hmm. Yeah, it'll be interesting. And for those who may not know or remember, the NCAA passed a new rule where after you get a first down, the clock does not stop. It keeps running unless it's the end of. Is it each half? 2 minutes at the end of each half, or just the
Yes.
fourth quarter?
It's the last 2 minutes of each half, just like the NFL.
Okay. Okay. So instead of having that clock stop after every single first down, the clock just runs until the last 2 minutes of each half. And like we talked about earlier, that came in play with the total. It didn't come in play, but you could tell the difference in the game, the pace of the game this past weekend, where we had a lot of. I'm pretty sure every game went under except for that USC game. And I don't remember the total on the Vanderbilt Hawaii game, which that one could have gone over, but I don't know the total of it. Um, but it did play a factor. And those were passing teams, so they're gonna throw anyways. I wrote about it, and I think they only ran for like 26 yards in the whole. the whole first half and not much else in the game. Um but anyways, that's the new rule and it's starting to play into effect, and the market and the sports books are gonna have to get used to it, and then obviously we'll have a better idea once we get into the season, at least 4 weeks or a month.
So three other plays that I have for you because I have four. I'm gonna try to do four every single weekend. I may not have four because, like I said, at the beginning month or the first month of the year, I'll have more spreads that
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna like than I will in October and November. So the amount of plays that I have will probably decrease every 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Um, so three other plays. One of them we just discussed. We were kind of hinting towards 15, 20 minutes ago, which was UTSA against Houston. So when this line first opened, from what I saw at least when it first opened, which was Houston -2, maybe even -2.5, and now that line is UTSA -1.5. So when I texted you about my my play on this game, it was at -1. So it's another thing that's moved in the direction of
Hmm.
where I'm favoring. So it's now 1.5. UTS, I mean, you can take either UTSA -1, UTSA -1.5. I guess whatever offers you plus money. Um, UTSA is covering this. Honestly, I would not be shocked if UTSA won this game by like 2 touchdowns. I don't see it with Houston this year. I think UTSA is great. I think Houston's below average. I know it's a road game, so that might make things a little bit more difficult. I'm sure Houston, as their first game of a Power Five, as a Power Five team, they're not going to
Hmm.
want a G5 team coming into their place and winning. But they don't have what it takes. UTSA does.
Wouldn't be the
Now,
first time.
yeah,
The first ever game at the new Houston Stadium, UTSA beat them on the road. So
okay.
I don't remember what year that was, but um, just that they've done it before. They've gone in there and beaten a Houston team. So um, UTSA's never beaten Houston in San Antonio. Houston's never beaten UTSA in Houston. So we'll see. But just want to drop that in.
That's a interesting nugget there. And UTSA probably should have won last year,
They
and that
should have
was a
won. Yeah.
yeah, and that was a much better Houston team last year than this year's team. Um, So without Clayton Tune, without Nathaniel Dell, I mean, those two guys carried that Houston offense last year. And then the offensive line wasn't bad. And now they lose most of those guys. I don't think the offensive line's that good. I don't think Donovan Smith, the transfer from Texas Tech, is all that special. Clayton Tune wasn't like
Well, I
special,
don't think he's
but
starting though. Didn't I
oh,
see?
he's
I
not even starting.
didn't I see that maybe a couple days ago, maybe last week, that they named another quarterback starter?
Well, then that's even worse news for Houston because from what I was made to believe,
Unless that was a
I
rumor. Unless that was a rumor, but I feel like I saw where he wasn't even being named the starter.
he's currently listed the starter here. But so, are the rumors that you heard with Lucas Coley?
I believe that was him. Yeah.
Lucas is currently listed second, but I mean they could flip flop. But that's my point. This whoever starts for Houston at quarterback, it's just it's not that it's not at the level of Frank Harris. How about that? We'll put it
Yeah.
that way.
No, I don't. I mean, yeah, I agree for sure. Yeah.
Now, one thing to look for is that Clark, the receiver for UTSA, is going to be a game time decision. But honestly, like I know they lose Akari Franklin, and so losing Clark on top of that, it won't be ideal. But they still have Oscar Cardenas. They still have Joshua Cephas. They still have another super senior there who's like 6'2", 205. Let me pull up his height and weight because I'm going blank on his name. Um,
Simon
oh, it's Tyke.
Kellogg.
Yeah, let's see. What is he? Oh gosh, no. Okay, I was thinking of another. So this guy's 6'5", 210. So,
Yeah, he's
um,
he's good.
and he's played around, and he's been playing with UTSA now. He's been around there for what 4 or 5 years? Isn't this like this his fifth or sixth year now?
Yeah, I'm not sure how many years. For sure, I don't have it in front of me. But yeah, he's been good, and they also have really good running backs. Kavorian Barnes,
Yeah,
stud. I think he'll be an NFL running back as long as he stays healthy. And they're gonna bring in pretty much a pretty strong defense with
Yeah,
more NFL talent. Trey Moore on the outside, and I mean, it's a talented team. Like it says UTSA on their chest, but they're going to be a top team in the country this season. I think that they'll be in the 24 pack for the most, if not all season, most of
yeah,
the season.
I agree with that. This was one of our favorite G5 teams for the last few months. You and I have been discussing
Yeah.
this roster. We think they are built to succeed in their first year in the American, and we think this again. It's kind of like a last ride kind of feel for them.
Hmm.
Got a ton of seniors, not just starters, but they got a lot of senior backups too, especially on defense. Um, and the offense has some senior backups, some, but yeah, this again, it kind of feels like one last ride. Um, so again, I think UTSA is winning that game decisively, not just covering that spread. I think they're winning by a comfortable margin.
Yeah. No,
So,
I'll probably have to agree with you on that. I think the same, and I obviously think pretty highly of UTSA this season as well. What's your third play?
so I got two more plays, and I'll quickly go over them because I do have some homework to get to before the end of the night. Um, so Washington, this is a larger number, so I'm taking a little bit of a risk here, but I like it. Washington minus 14 and a half against Boise. Um,
This is in Boise, right?
this is actually in Washington.
Oh,
This is
okay,
in
okay, okay.
Washington. Yeah. Um, there's no look ahead spot here for Washington. So let's just go ahead and get that out of the way. They play a rebuilding Tulsa team that we were just discussing earlier in the show at home the following week, or they play Tulsa in Washington next Saturday. So there's no look ahead spot here. Um, I'm not sure if you knew this. Here's a little nugget. I almost included this in the preview magazine discussing the Mountain West, but the Mountain West graded out that the worst it's ever graded out in its 25-year history last year as a conference overall. And we saw Boise and Fresno State look great against Mountain West competition. Of course, Jay Kaner and Fresno State was a really good team, but we saw both of those teams struggle in the non-conference. Of course, Fresno played really good in their bowl game when they were all healthy against a Washington State team that had a ton of opt outs, or not opt outs, but they had a ton of players transfer out before that bowl game. But outside of that, the Mountain West did not look good at all in the non conference last year. And Boise is not going to be as talented on defense this year as they've been in recent years, for the last several years, really. Offensively, I think Talon Green is an athlete, a really good athlete at quarterback. He still has to polish his passing game a little bit more. The receiving core for Boise, I forgot who it was, but they're going to be without one of their top receivers this year for the whole entire year. Um, the receiving core has some experience. I don't think they have any dudes. Talon Green, again, like I just mentioned, he still has a lot of improvements to make in the passing game. The offensive line and running back room is really good, so they're going to be a really strong running team. But that matches up well for Washington because Washington's strength defensively is going to be their front seven this year, not the secondary. The secondary is going to be the question for Washington this year, their defensive secondary. But I don't think Boise has what it takes to go on the road and really threaten their secondary. Nor do I think Boise is going to be equipped to contain this passing offense for Washington. A lot of questions in that back end of the defense for Boise to start the year, and I think it's going to be exposed against a Washington team that returns all their top receivers, and of course Michael Penix and a really good tackle combination on their offensive line. Um, Now we'll see how the running clock does for Boise in this game, but again, I don't think they're going to be getting a ton of first downs at a consistent rate against this Washington defensive line in front seven. I think Washington covers a spread. I think they're good enough to win by 17 plus, if not win by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, and it's important as well that okay, so this is a 2:30 p.m. Central Time game. So this is about what 12:30 kick Pacific, and Washington was, I think they may have only lost one home game last year, if that. Um so they play and they put
They never
themselves or
lost at home last year.
okay, so that makes sense. Then they played amazing at home last year. Not great on the road, but at home they just have like a different mode. The atmospheres turn up, and they proved that last season. Especially, I think their first home game was against Michigan State, and they did a number on them, a Big Ten school. So yeah, I'm kind of agreeing with you here, Connor. I was hoping it would be a night game because then it would definitely be rocking in the stadium. But yeah, 14 and a half is pretty short for this Boise team against, this Washington team that has plenty of talent returning, especially on the offensive side of the ball. The defense should be able to hold their own. And yeah, that's now that I'm thinking about it, 14 and a half, that'll probably move. It feels like a short number against this Boise team compared to the talent offensively Washington has.
So in the past, like I remember discussing this game with a lot of my friends um, throughout the summer, and I'm like, this line, I don't remember what it opened up, but I don't think it's changed much, if any. Um,
Um let's let me look it up.
but
Washington, yeah, it opened at 14 and a half. I've got
yeah,
115 at the circa, which means this number will probably move to 15 soon in more sports books, I imagine. But I have which sports book is this? At the
is there like a
Mirage.
13, 14?
No, it's a 14 and a half, but
Yeah.
the juice is going towards Boise State. Not a ton of juice, but there's still some money coming in on Boise State, at least at the Mirage. But that's just a very basically a blip compared to everywhere else is 14 and a half, except for the Circa and Mirage. But so this number will probably move 14 and a half. That's kind of that's a doable number, and I don't disagree with it because it's a huge talent difference, and Washington will be playing at home where they are pretty lethal.
Yeah. And again, if you look at the non-conference last year for the Mountain West, it was not that impressive. And I don't think Boise is going to be as good on defense this year as they were last year. So first game of the season, best believe with all these guys returning for Washington, having that run it back kind of mentality, I think they're going to put it to Boise. In the past, I would stay away from this because we knew what to expect from Boise.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I don't think we know what to expect from Boise. I mean, we know they're going to be a good running team offensively. Outside of that, I don't know what to expect. They don't have Chris Peterson as their head coach anymore. They don't have Brian Harson as their coach anymore, and that's nothing against Andy Avalos.
Yeah, he's
I
he's okay. He's just super.
Yeah,
What is he? The At least last year, I think he was like one of the youngest head coaches in college football.
yeah. I mean, he is really young, and he's a former defensive player. I think he played defense
He
for
played
Boise
for
years ago.
Chris Peterson.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty
So I
sure.
mean,
If it wasn't him, it was Brian Harson. But I don't think he's that young. But he
no,
definitely
no.
played. He
Yeah,
definitely played at Boise.
yeah. I think it was for Peterson. Um, but yeah, I just don't think Boise is going to be quite as talented this year. So, and by the way, both of these teams, or I'm sorry, Washington's win total preseason is at 9.5 in like every single sports book, but Boise's was at 7.5. I know a lot of people that were hammering that over, and they might hit that over because the Mountain West is just not that good right now, and Boise's still the class of the Mountain West. But in terms of their non-conference, I'm not buying Boise this year in their
Yeah.
non-conference play. So take Washington to cover here, unless I mean the only way that Boise covers the spread is going to be with garbage time points because they score a touchdown in the closing seconds or minute of the game and they lose by 14. That is the only way they're going to cover the spread because again, there's no look ahead spot here for Washington.
Which that would
They're
probably mean Washington would have pretty bad game if they only win by, if they're up by 21, 14 points, they could probably. That mean I wouldn't say they would have a bad game, but it would definitely not be what they're looking to do with their expectations for the season. Is only be boys by 14 points.
exactly. And because I'm the reason why I keep on mentioning there's no look ahead spot here, it's because Washington's got a ton of momentum coming into this year. They're going to want to put on a show to start off with.
Oh yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so I like them here. I could see a final score of like 42-21 or 45 to 20 or something like
Hmm.
that. They cover.
Yeah.
Last one here. This one, believe it or not, is actually one of my more confident ones. If I'm correct at least about this team, then I should be correct about the spread. So I texted you South Alabama +6 in New Orleans. I think this number is back up to 6.5. It's back
Okay.
and forth between 6 and 6.5. If someone can find a South Alabama +7 before kickoff, I would suggest taking that one. But I think South Alabama is good enough to win this game outright. I really do. I think this is, in my opinion, it's either UTSA, or South Alabama with the best roster in the entire G5 for this fall. I think Tulane is still a really good team. I love their coaching staff. But man, this South Alabama team, as I wrote about in the preview, they got dudes. And they got that senior experience, so they're not going to fold under pressure. Remember, South Alabama, they were really good in one score games last year. That was a good team last year. This South Alabama team is going to be better than last year. So they're not going to be in as many close games. And if they are, they're going to know how to pull it out.
Yeah.
Um, they got two quarterbacks they can win with. So if one of the guys goes down with some terrible injury, don't worry. You got a backup. And let me pull him up right now. I'm going blank on his name. But they got Bradley Carter as their starting quarterback. He's a senior. And then Desmond Trotter as another redshirt senior for their backup quarterback. And Desmond Trotter actually used to be the starting quarterback for USA just a couple of years ago. So they're loaded at quarterback. They got
Hmm.
LaDainian Webb at running back. They got seniors galore at tight end, and they use a ton of tight ends. Um, they go like six deep at tight end, and they run two tight end sets usually. They're all seniors. The offensive line, they don't have a ton of depth, but I like the starters a lot.
Hmm.
Receivers loaded. Javon Ivory, Devin Boyson, Colin Lacey. They got some dudes there. And then defensively, they were one of the top teams against the run last year. The front seven is loaded with experience and seniors. And then in the back end, they're a junior late in secondary, but this is the most talented position group on the team. You got Keith Gallman Jr. At safety, Jaden Voisin at safety, and then Yam Banks at safety. Like these are dudes, and then they got a couple of their former top defensive backs a couple years ago back from injury in their cornerback roles. Man, this is such a good team. And by the way, they've got a really good place kicker too, and I think I talked about him briefly in the preview magazine. This is a good team. South Alabama +6.5 right now. I think that's the highest spread total that I can get.
Yeah, I didn't see any sevens. I didn't see any sevens. It looks like there's a lot of sixes and 6.5 still out there. But yeah, I don't see any sevens left. Where did it go? South Alabama. There it is. Let's see here. We got a six, 6.5, 6.5, six, 6.5. Yeah, Circa's at 6.5, and Golden Nuggets at 6.5. So let me check DraftKings.
But just to fill some time here,
Yep, 6.5.
this South Alabama team is real good. I'm not just talking like, oh, they got that senior experience and they were pretty good last year. They have a lot of production back, so they should be a really effective team. It's more than just that. They've got, I think, a handful of dudes here who are going to be drafted,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in that defensive secondary. Maybe one of these receivers um, can develop into a decent NFL talent. Remember, South Alabama has had, I think, two receivers drafted over the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no shortage of talent. Now they just got a good coach that's coaching them up, and they've been building this roster now for a few years. So I really like what this team has for this year. Um, this is the team to beat in the Sun Belt this year, and as you know, um, This was one of our over bets
Point
for the
total. Yep.
this yeah for the preseason win totals. Um, the win total for South Alabama was at 7.5. When I took it, it was like minus 162, 164
Mm-hmm.
juice, something like that.
Yeah, it's
It's now like at
close.
minus. It's now like at minus 190 something
Wow.
for that.
Yeah, I would have
Yeah.
thought they would
So
have moved it in. And they also have Major Applewhite back as offensive coordinator, leading the offense. So that, he did a great job coming back in and leading the offense last season. So like you said, all the talents there. Um, it's up to them to put it all together once again.
yeah, and they are just loaded with depth. I mean, if you look just across this depth chart, they go three deep at most positions. It's just crazy for a G5 team.
Yeah.
This team has the potential to be special this year. If they beat either Tulane or Oklahoma State in the non-conference, because I think they're beating James Madison straight up, and I think they can beat Troy straight up, even though they're going to have to do it on the road.
Yep.
So I know those road games can be tricky, and they might trip up one or two times there. I get it, but this team has the potential to be special this year. And again, they can win one of those non-conference games. They would put themselves on the map for the rest of the season, and they would be respected by the CFP committee later in the year. So
Yeah, yeah, that would, I wouldn't want to say a miracle, but they would definitely need a miracle to get into the college football playoff. But at least if they
oh,
could get a New Year's Six bowl, um, as the highest G5 school, then that's always good.
so I'm going to every single year, it's like if a couple of those guys on the Cover Three podcast, they'll kind of like ride a team that whole entire year. Like last year, Bud Elliott did it with Troy.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess for me, I'm going to be riding South Alabama this year. So I guess every single um, when we do our plays every single weekend, I'm probably going to be ending with
With
pick the
South
points with
Alabama.
South Alabama or something like that. So
Yeah,
I
if the
mean,
price is right there, there's nothing wrong with that.
yeah, worst case scenario, I mean, obviously there's the turnover differential thing. Who knows with that? Can't
Mm-hmm.
predict that. But if it all just it's a normal played game and both teams played their potential without any significant injury, South Alabama's covering the spread unless it's tied and Tulane scores a touchdown in the closing seconds and they make the extra point and South Alabama doesn't score with their ensuing drive. So that's the only way Tulane can cover this spread. And I would not be surprised to see South Alabama win this game outright. In fact, you know, everyone's been talking about Tulane and that non-conference game they got against Ole Miss in week 2. Do you think there's any chance Tulane might look ahead of that game?
I think so.
I certainly think the coaching staff for Tulane gets their team ready, so I don't think they're going to exactly be sleeping on South Alabama. I think they know the
They
kind of roster
shouldn't
they're
be.
going up
Yeah.
against.
Yeah.
But I think the general public is certainly sleeping on this game. That's why I'm taking the points here, and also because I think the market is undervaluing the South Alabama team. And we saw as soon as we made that win total bet in our preview, it seems like that number gets juiced, and or it goes up to 8.5 in some other sports books.
Yeah.
So
It did for sure.
we're trying to help. We're trying to help as many people as we can with our win total bets and with our plays here.
Yeah, and we'll see how it goes. Hopefully they do beat James Madison on the road. That'll help my James Madison under, so I wouldn't be mad at that
Right.
whatsoever.
Yeah. So yeah, we're going to be riding. At least both of us are going to be riding South Alabama for that weekend in particular. But yeah, I'm so excited about this team. As you can see, I know I've talked about them a lot with you over the last month or two.
And thankfully it's
Um,
a very good game to start off the season too against Tulane. That'll be a fun one to watch.
yeah, but yeah, I mean this team is just so good, and I literally talked about Ladamian Webb for like 5 seconds several minutes ago, but that's a really good running back for South Alabama. Last year Tulane, his name escapes me, but he was one of the better running backs in the country last year. Had a great game against USC
Yep.
in the bowl game, but I don't think Ladamian Webb has that much upside. But I mean, he's a really good college player, and so he's back for his redshirt senior year as well. So yeah, I cannot wait to see these Jaguars this year, and would not be surprised to see them jump on Tulane early, like a 7, 10-0 lead, and then Tulane kind of fights back into it, but then South Alabama holds on at the end, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but watch out for this team because whether or not they finish 11-1 or something, I still think this team has got what it takes to beat almost any team on their schedule. So
Yeah. No, and I'm looking forward to that game and to see how they play out the rest of the season. But it looks like that's all our games for Thursday. Those are Connor's 4 plays for this. Yeah, they were all Saturday games. So those are your 4 games
yeah,
for Saturday. And we'll have something cooked up for if I have any plays, which I probably will. I'll have those ready to go for Thursday, early Thursday. Um, and the same thing with Friday, Saturday, and Connor and I will get together and have everything put out, ready to go. We'll see how the podcasts and everything goes for what we could do, what we could put out for the next couple of days. We will. But until then, this is the end of our 3rd episode previewing Thursday's games. And let us know if you want to hear anything else specific in the comments for the next upcoming couple of days, next week. Just let us know, and we'll try to get as much content and whatever y'all are looking for out there for y'all. So because we have plenty of to talk about on all the games, but we got a little late start to get today, so we weren't able to get through Friday's games. But it's still early in the season, and we have long ways to go. So we'll get as much out as possible for y'all, though. But let's go ahead and we'll shut it down here, Connor.
and please subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Yeah, subscribe, follow us, check out the website, hit us up everywhere. We usually post everything on Instagram, Twitter, and whatever we have video wise on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. So follow us here, obviously, for the podcast.